Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Narcan training. And it's International Overdose Awareness Day. And we're really honored to be able to present this to you and give you some tools that really could help save a life. And I noticed some people on here who I think were probably at my first Narcan training. And I just wanted to say thank you to a couple people first. And the Inland Empire harm reduction people, this is the first woman who came out and did a training for me so that I could get trained. And then I took a train the trainer program with a woman who actually goes over to Skid Row and does training, which was probably as valuable as all of the other trainings put together. And it has a large component of what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And then I also want to thank Renewal Health Group. I work with Renewal Health Group, and we are substance abuse in LA and out here in the desert, Palm Desert. And we also have mental health primary in LA, and we're in the growth phase of opening several mental health primaries in LA, including our new food disorder at the Lake House, which we had an opening last week. And it was really nice to do the social distancing face-to-face with people, or mask-to-mask, if you want to call it. But I want to thank them for believing in what I do, like that, that this is as important as any of the other kind of outreach we can do and to help people really save lives. And the two owners of this company are very committed to helping save people's lives. So they were all about it when I told them that was how I was spending a good part of today. And on the call with us, I have a couple of the dream team with me. I have Monica Montoya, who's going to be helping watch the chat, and Christy Kettle, because we're giving away a lot of Narcan during this training, because if we train you to save the lives, we want you to be able to actually have the tools you need in order to do it. And that reminds me, Monica, would you do the housekeeping for me, please?
Sure.
All right, because I have to run 1 second. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Okay, so we are going to give away 10 Narcan. There are going to be questions periodically. Renee will give those out. And if you raise your hand with the raise your hand feature, or indicate that you have the answer in chat, then you will be a winner. We also have 2 gift certificates, one from our Palm Springs Phoenix Rising location and one from our Renewal Mental Primary location in Los Angeles. And so those are 2 $50 gift certificates for lunch. And so I would pay attention, and at the end, you'll be able to we can facilitate that for you and give those to you. If you have any questions, please, we monitor chat. So if you'll put those in chat or raise your hand, Renee will get to you, and we'll alert her anytime there's something in the chat box.
Thank you so much. I forgot the Narcan. Let's all just have a laugh here first. This is actually the very first time that I'm doing this as a Zoom presentation instead of a live conversation. And I had to change it up a little bit. But one of the important things is the Narcan. And these are what we will be sending to the people who stay, answer the questions, and there's a couple of other questions along the way. I want to introduce who I am. Some of you know me, some of you don't know me, but my name is Renee Baribeau, and I haven't had a drink. I've been sober for, I don't know, 32, 33 years. And the Narcan training came because if you know me, you know that I'm always thinking business and marketing and how to get things out into the world. And so I thought, well, I think I'm going to train my business development team on how to be Narcan ambassadors, so that it's a great way of getting out in the community, will look good, all of this stuff, because I'm always trying to think about how to network, how to be out there. And then all of a sudden, I was working at Michael's house, and I was doing the alumni weekend, and they were going to be my first Save a Life ambassadors. So I get in front of about 30 alumni, and I asked the question, and I'm going to ask this question here in a minute. I said, how many people have ever had to save somebody's life in an overdose? And I'm standing there in the front of the room, you know, the marketer, the happy-go-lucky event planner, And everyone in the room raised their hands. Standing, my mouth dropped open. There's 30 people in front of me and everyone raised their hands. And it stopped me. And then in the middle picture you'd see here, this is my estranged nephew, John. This is when he was a kid. And what I want to say about him is, you know, he was born addicted and then he was given up for adoption in a lovely family. I mean, you couldn't have wanted for a better family, you know, and here he is playing baseball at summer camp. And when he was 16, 17 years old, he had a lacrosse injury and the doctor put him on an opioid and he was off to the races with his own heroin addiction. And last Christmas Day, he died. And so I'm doing this training today for him. And then the third picture you see is the New York City cab. And I just, there for the grace of God go I. I was in cooking school. I was 22, 23 years old. And I was with these girls and they were snorting heroin. And, you know, I'd had a couple drinks and I thought like, well, I want to try it. And they said, no. And to this day, I believe that the one single difference between me becoming a heroin addict or not, because my older sister is that those women said no to me that day. And that was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And so if I can save a life, and I really even haven't been called into action yet, but I bet you some of the people that I train will be. And so that's why I'm here doing this. So I'm going to ask here, and you have the chat, you have the raise your hands. Who here has witnessed an overdose? I can't see the chat. Hold on.
Desiree was the first one up.
So Desiree, since you've witnessed an overdose, we're going to send you some Narcan. So make sure you put your name and you can do it privately to Monica if you don't want everyone to have it. We're going to send you some Narcan if you'd like. So you have to send Monica your name and your address and all of that, and we'll get it in the mail to you. So how many people here, Monica? Is there a lot who've witnessed an overdose, or we got
3 different people? So I think maybe, would you like to send a couple of those as well? Bobby and Lori.
Okay, yeah, Bobby and Lori will do that.
Rory from Ken Seeley's community. So we'll send that over to you. So anyone that is winning, please send me a private message or send it in chat. Let me have your email address and your phone number. And most of you, I know.
We need your address for us to send you Narcan, but we could start with your email address if that works better.
And then Renee, if everybody will lower their hands for the next question before we go on to the next question.
Thank you. Good point. That's Christy Kettle. You're hearing her, and the other voice is Monica. Right. And Katerina, that's an important one, that somebody witnessed an overdose from prescription drugs. You know, and that's the truth. So the next question is, who on this call has overdosed themselves? Is anyone going to be brave enough?
Bobby Joe.
So Bobby Joe, we're going to send you some Narcan too. And when I asked that same question in that room that day, we have 2 who've overdosed. So
we've got a few. Molly, Sasha.
Wow.
All right. So we're going to send all of those people some Narcan too.
And then also Eliester.
Please send me your contact information.
Yeah, you have to send Monica privately or put it in the chat if you feel like you want everyone to have your information.
And you too, Miss Sasha.
And what I want to say about that, and then the rest we're going to give out when we do the quiz at the end, because you also can let us know if you need a certificate. If you need a certificate, just put your name and say certificate in there with your email address. I don't need to mail that. You can print it out yourself. I want to talk about bias, because to me, this is what I learned at the presentation from the woman who went down to Skid Row. When all of a sudden I show up in LA, I'm going to be the trainer, and I look around and I had a bias. I'm thinking like, where do all these people they work? They don't certainly work at the high-end treatment center I work at. And I had to check my bias at the door. And then the woman started to talk about when she was delivering, envelopes of Narcan down to Skid Row, how the police would come through and do a sweep and take all of the Narcan away after that they just left it there for them. And I thought to myself, like, wow, what is my bias? So look into yourself and think about what your bias is. I know there was a bias in AA when I stopped going to AA a few years back, was that people in AA seem to have a holier than thou attitude at this particular junction, where they thought that because they had it, they had something, they had their sobriety, that poor sot crawling back in the room after they'd been out on that one more bender, that somehow that they were a step up from that other person. And I had to look at my own self in my own life and look at to say, like, okay, like, what is my bias around this? And police have a bias, like, and I'll go over it later when I talk about how you actually deal with this, but the police have a bias too. They're like, oh, I've saved that guy's life 5 times. Why should I go running on back down there to save it again? And the truth of the matter is that you don't know when the addict is going to get it or what they're going to get. And so part of this work about becoming an ambassador of life is subscribing and agreeing to the principles of harm reduction. Now, there's been some AA thumpers and big book thumpers who say, no way, no how. And you know what? Let's get real. The big book is a wonderful piece of a tool. I use it with my coaching clients. I think that step work is brilliant and should be used by everyone, whether you're sober or not. And that's what it says in the big book, that these ways have their usefulness for all. And I really believe it's step 4, 5, 6, and making those amends. Really, so that's what causes that constitutional shift where you actually have a new experience. And from that new experience, first of all, I don't think you ever want to do it again, make those amends if you really do them thoroughly. And second of all, you can check yourself daily and, and then do an occasional check. However, in that old model, there wasn't the room for harm reduction. And harm reduction means that to understand that there's illicit drugs that are part of our world, and we could either condemn them or we could kind of say, okay, this is something I have to cooperate with in my life. It's complex, it's multifaceted. There's Adi Jaffe, he's really big in meeting people where they're at, helping them where they're at. And maybe for some people, it's gonna be that they do some psychology work on themselves or spiritual work, and they find a balance in their life that works for them, and it still involves drinking. Or heroin addicts who find a different way, but that their quality of life comes better. So for me, I talk about my recovery in terms of, am I being of service in the world? Can I show up every single day? And am I happy? If I'm still suffering, then clearly I have work to do. But the idea of Narcan is about harm reduction, and it does not judge whether or not the person that you're going to help today who has, that you're going to save a life, because saving a life might give somebody another opportunity to get out of the suffering and have a life that's better worth living. And you might have different feelings about that or whatever, but the truth of the matter is that this is the basic principle of Narcan. And if those of you are taking the quiz at the end, look at this slide. Drug overdose death is the #1 preventable death in the United States. 67,000 people died of a drug overdose. And my brother-in-law, who works in the hospital field, believes that, like I do, that those are just the reported ones. Those are the ones, the addicts that die in the street. Those aren't your mothers, your grandmothers, those people taking the medication and the prescription as prescribed, and it builds up in their system, and then they have complications from this, and then they die. like one of I've been talking about this harm reduction in this thing to my younger sister, and she said, at first I wasn't so sure, Renee, but then one of our friends died last week in his sleep. And so the truth is we get pinpointed out as we're the junkies on the street, when actually why everyone should have Narcan is because doctors prescribe prescriptions, and you build up a chemical dependency to these things, and people are dying, and they didn't even know for the longest time what they were dying from. So in this little workshop we're having today, and this is more of a workshop than like a big networking event, although we do want the networking to happen too over in the chat for those of you who are here for that, is that the goals of this is to define and understand naloxone, Narcan, the brand. Naloxone is the terminology for the medication, and Narcan is the brand. So this is the brand that happens to be really connected and giving out, they give it out for free, especially if you're a nonprofit or you work with a nonprofit. You can become a trainer like I am and actually get free Narcan to distribute to people. People who work for commercial companies have a little bit more of a challenging time with it. But then we were going to talk about how to recognize an opioid overdose and learn what to do in the event of an opioid overdose. I also have links to more in-depth videos and things like that in the back. So if you really want to get more deeply involved, but this is basically to understand the principles of the bias, the saving the lives, how to recognize an opioid overdose, and what to do in the event of one. So let's talk about this. So how the Narcan works is this is the best thing I ever learned when I was in a mental health institution. At 30, when I went to treatment, they didn't have a dual diagnosis treatment center. You either went to the lockdown ward or you went to Karen. And I went to the lockdown ward because I wanted to understand how the brain works. Lo and behold, it comes in handy when I'm talking about the Narcan. So what happens in the brain is that when you send an impulse, the nerve fires to the next nerve. And so, it's a little more complicated, but in addictive brains, what happens is that it doesn't absorb in the nucleus and it keeps refiring. Okay. Well, it kind of works on the same principles as antidepressants, is that the antidepressants blocks the reabsorption of the nerve that keeps refiring. Well, this blocks the opioid receptors. And so that's what this does. Now, one thing about when you go blocking the opioid receptors is you really, two things. Want to make sure that the person's really having an overdose, because you are just going to ruin their high. And you also have to make sure that you really get the help that they might need afterwards, because this blocks those opioid receptors. And so if the addict is really intent on getting high and they take some more, or they took a lot, or there was a lot of fentanyl in it, that could keep acting up. So after this wears off in 30 or 40 minutes, they could go back into an overdose. So that's why it's really suggested that you call 911. But what's really nice is they have the different things like the oxycodone and things that are prescribed over the counter medicines that people are, overdosing from. So it reverses the effects of opioids. And it includes codeine, hydrocodone, Vicodin, morphine, oxycodone, Oxycontin, Percocet, hydromorphine, Dilaudid, fentanyl, and heroin. It does not reverse the effects of alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and methamphetamines. And it works within 2 minutes. And like I said, that it could wear out before the high does. So that's a tricky part where, unless you're a medical doctor, you may not want to take that risk. But speaking of that risk, if you step in to save a life, and I don't know why I don't have these slides in here, you're protected. And the Good Samaritan Clause says that if you're attempting to save somebody's life, it's the same thing if you know CPR, that you won't be cited or fined or sued or anything. You're not liable if the person dies. And so that's important to know. And also, if you walk into a situation and there's a lot of heroin around and stuff like that, focus on the person. You know, once they're breathing again, you can hide this stuff once you've called 911, but they're not allowed to come into a dangerous situation like this where somebody's life is at risk and arrest you for having drugs. So those are two important things to know, that you're protected under the Good Samaritan law and they can't arrest you for the drugs. Not to say that I wouldn't hide the drugs, but I'm just saying that they won't. And the other thing is, there was this whole big thing about why should we give out Narcan? People are going to have Narcan parties. Well, unless you're high on an opioid, it's not going to have any effect on you except for annoy your nasal passages and things like that. And I don't think anyone would be having Narcan parties when they've just spent some good money on the drugs to stay high. Why would you want to, have Narcan around? Although you might want to have Narcan around, and if you're having I guess people do it in parties, but not parties, or in groups, so that if somebody overdoses, there's somebody else there to give them to wake them up. So you wouldn't take Naloxone because nasal irritation, like I said, opioid withdrawal in people. So you have to be really careful, because you are going to wake somebody up from a high, and they might be thinking they were nodding out, and you just took them right fast from that state, and they're going to be not so happy with you. And they could have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. All of these, are different side effects. Seizures, cardiac arrests are rare, but it can happen. You never know. Allergies. So all of these are the same side effects of an opioid overdose as well. My older sister, the same one who lost that child, had a stroke because she said the heroin addicts had stopped using heroin because of the fentanyl, and they'd gone back to smoking cocaine. And the thing is that, I mean, it sounds a little crazy, but that's what they do. All right. If you're not muted, you might want to mute yourself, because we're trying to get a good recording for somebody who might watch this later. So the signs of an overdose. And again, since I've never really been in heroin, you'd probably recognize this a little bit different, but the person is unresponsive, which is a little bit different than nodding out. They have purple or blue lips, and under the nail bed is turning purple as well. They're slow breathing, uneven breathing, isn't breathing at all, gurgling or snoring. Now, to know the difference between somebody who is overdosing and somebody who's just snoozing is to call their names, to tap them on the shoulder. I think in some places they kick them on the bottom of the feet, but that's kind of rude. Call their name. Renee, Monica, are you there? And if you start tapping somebody who's having a nice, even snooze, they're going to be yelling at you really quickly that you're disturbing them. Because people who have overdosed can't give themselves Narcan, which means they cannot respond to you. So that's when you know, hey, this person's having an overdose. I need to jump in here. But if they're having panic, rapid deep breathing, tachycardia, fainting, flushing, or this woman looks like she's at the subway freaking out. It's not, she might have taken too much, but it's not an overdose. An overdose is the person is unresponsive. And you can overdose on so many different things. It could be multiple drugs. It could be the combination of things. They're like cocaine and they're cutting these things with fentanyl, which is deadly. So the thing is that the symptoms may look similar. The fast heart rates, the dilated pupil, the sweating, and they could be confusing symptoms. But one of the biggest ones is the person is unresponsive. And if you're suspecting, that gives you a broad range. If you're suspecting an overdose, it's appropriate to give Narcan, because why? Remember what I said earlier? Anyone? It has no effects if it's not interfering with the opioids going from brain cell to brain cell. It won't do anything except for aggravate your nose. So there's some extra things that give you a higher overdose risk factor. Now, this happens so much, is that a lot of times when I was the alumni coordinator, I used to see, like, when I first started, it was shocking, you know, like a death a week was going across my desk. Well, they're like, wow, I don't know if I can do this job. Then I thought about the 29, 30 other people who did something good in their life, good for them in their life that week. Because I don't know that overdosing is bad for you, except for you might die. But that it was really because people get out of treatment. They're clean. They haven't used in 30, 60, 90 days. And so they go out there and think that they could handle what they could handle before, and boom, they're dead. That happens a lot after people leave jails as well. The other thing is when you start mixing your drugs with sedatives and alcohol and benzos, there's more of a tolerance to have this. And the high doses of prescription opioids, even when they're as prescribed, they build up and they store in your fat cells. I was just reading an article about how long, and especially as you get older, how long things take to get out of your fat cells. And so there's this buildup, and then you just don't know. And so people will die in their sleep from this. This is what I put parents and grandparents. You know, we know about the junkies at Skid Row and the ones who work and do their lives, but I think that everyone should have Narcan. If anyone's on pain medicine in their house, that when the doctors give out pain medicine, I believe they're starting to give out a prescription for Narcan as well, because, you know, you kind of can forget, did I take one or did I take six? And it's just rampant. So we kind of talked about what the signs of an overdose looks like. And we're going to look into, so what do we do if we see somebody overdosing? And what do we do if we see somebody overdosing and we don't have our Narcan? Well, so down here, and I'll send everybody who registered today the slides so that you can go back and watch this YouTube video, which I thought was really informative about step-by-step. It was more kind of CPR, what do you do, how does it work type of experience. And if you don't know CPR and first aid, you can still help somebody. And if I don't know, I just happen to work in treatment where they required me to get my first aid and CPR, and I've never had to use it. But I think that if I had to, I would know what to do. So we talked a little bit earlier about what's the first thing you do. Well, the first thing you do is you assess the situation, and then you call 911. Or if you have a friend with you, you ask them to call 911. And when they're done calling 911, they can hide the drugs and whatever else you feel needs to happen in the situation. But the words that you want to tell the police is, my friend, my mother, my father, my grandmother is unresponsive. You don't want to say, my friend is having an overdose, because trust me, if there's just another call coming in, you might not be the first one at the top of the line, especially if John has been, they came to him 6, 7 times last week or last year. So you don't give them the bait to put you second on the list. You say, my friend is unresponsive, we need help. And I think that that's one of the important things that I learned about the woman who went down to Skid Row, is that really that there is a bias, and that we really need to be really cognizant of our words when we call 911. So we've come in, we've assessed the scene, we've looked at if there's any dangerous objects, needles. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to prick yourself with the needle, because again, you don't know if there's fentanyl. I mean, you watch some of those TV shows and you see that fentanyl can kill people just by inhaling it. So you want to make sure the scene is clear before you really dive in and get to work. You called 911 and you're going to try to wake the person. So again, you're going to tap on their shoulders. Monica, are you awake? Monica. then if they're getting, you can go into their sternum. Here, let me show you. Go like deep into the sternum with your knuckles, and trust me, if they're like just nodding out, that is going to get them moving, because you don't want to disrupt the experience if they're not really having an overdose. Then you want to check the pulse, which, you all know how to check the pulse. I'm sure can you feel it? And then listen for the breathing. Now, the breathing can be really labored if they're having an overdose, or it could be really soft. Now, personally for me, I think all things aside, that if I saw somebody lying in front of me dying, I wouldn't worry about where my mouth guard was, where my CPR tools were. I really think that I would probably get in there and try to save a life. Now, as I said, this has all been in theory in my life, knock on wood, and that's up to you, how you feel. So then what you do with the Narcan, and you could say, oh yeah, you're chewing on. But the good news about this Narcan is that it has the directions right on the box. 1, 2, 3. You identify the you give the Narcan nasal spray, and they say call emergency for help, but I would, if there was 2 of you, I would do that first. Now, so they come in little packets like this, and what I've been told, so if you have some Narcan laying around and you said, oh, it expired, I was told it is good for a couple of years after the expiration date, but they have to put an expiration date on there. The other part that's really important is there's probably a lot of people who are addicts, or who are addicts on this call. And if you're an addict like me, it's like 1 drink is good, 30 is better. Well, the reverse is true in Narcan. 1 squirt and then wait. Because remember, you're taking somebody who's in a flat state, and you are having them go into quick withdrawal. And I've never had to withdraw from heroin, but I hear it's really painful, and you get really agitated, and you really go into a quick withdrawal. And so if you want to make sure, I've heard instances of people come out swinging when it's like, you just ruined my high. Well, but you were going to die. So that's the choice. You were going to die. And so if you don't see any improvement in a couple of minutes, and 3 might be a long, because you're sitting there, you're like, oh my God, this person's not coming back. You want to give them another shot of the Narcan. So basically you put you put their head back, like, so that, and this is a CPR thing, and that's why I'd watch the video if you're not CPR trained, so that the airway is clear. You kind of open up to make sure that they're not choking on any vomit or anything like that. Now that part gets a little bit, that's where you want to make sure that you're comfortable with this. And then you give it a squirt, and then you wait. And then in between, if you know CPR, do people on this call know CPR? How many people know CPR? Monica, watch this list. Yay, Desiree already won one. Steve hasn't won one yet. So Steve, you're gonna get a Narcan. Angie gets a Narcan.
Melissa.
Okay, so 3 people got Narcan in that round. And so then, so you're gonna start the breathing and the chest compressions. Now, say like say like, hey, there's just too many diseases out there, Renee. I'm not breathing into somebody's mouth that I don't know, who's using heroin, shooting up needles. So what you can do is just do the chest compressions until the ambulance gets there. So basically you wait for the response, and then what you need to do is, you say like, no, we're not calling no ambulance. Somebody needs to stay there, because, like I said, the Narcan's going to wear off and the opioids might not. So you might want to be there to make sure. If you get to choose, do I call an ambulance or do I stay with this person for 60 to 90 minutes? That's your choice. So then what you're going to do is, is that, so you're going to turn them on their side. Once you administer the Narcan and you're waiting for you want to turn them over their side so that they don't vomit and they don't choke to death and stuff like that. So once you've put the Narcan in and they're starting to be still a little bit unresponsive, you want to put them in this recovery position to wake up. Now, if you've given them too much, they're going to wake up and you're going to skip this step. But this is like, so somebody's kind of groggy, you flip them on their side, and this shows you, really how to do that. So you put their one arm up and then you roll them on their side with their knees so you don't pull out your back while you're doing it. And then they lay with one hand under their head and their knee bent. I just want to tell you how not to respond. People will they'll use ice to cool down the body. They'll put a person in a bath or a shower. They'll slap or burn somebody. They'll give a drink to induce vomiting. They inject the person with cocaine, salt water. No. You can slow the heart rate if you use ice, and then you're going to put them into arrhythmia. You put the person in the shower, they're going to drown. If you don't want to bruise people, you don't want to have worse causes. If you induce vomiting, they could choke to death. And then you want to give high blood pressure or a stroke. All of these other things are ways that you don't want to respond. All right, are we ready? Are there any questions before I go on to the quiz? Because the quiz is for people who we want to get the certificate. And the rest of you can kind of just, test yourself. All right, I got this quiz off the UMass Talks. A lot of information out there on Narcan, so I can't tell you I made this quiz up. Are we ready for the quiz, Monica? So sure. If when you know the answer, put it into the chat box. What is the leading cause of preventable deaths in the United States? Drownings, gunshot wounds, homicide, motor vehicle accidents, overdose. Monica, you'll have to monitor that, or Christy, somebody who hasn't gotten who hasn't gotten one already.
This is for a certificate, though, so it can be.
No, this is for the more Narcan. One person for each question. So we'll just have to make sure that we have a list of people paying attention who haven't already gotten all of the other ones. Which of the following is a sign of an overdose, opioid overdose? Falling asleep or loss of consciousness, limp body, choking or gurgling sounds, slow or shallow breathing. Someone who said all of the above.
E.
So we'll have to see, Monica, you're watching that. You know what? We need to put a little line in between the questions.
Impossible, but.
Line before next. There. When is the best time to call 911? As soon as you recognize an overdose, after you give the Narcan, after you start chest compression, after the person is awake and talking. Do not call 911 and drive the person to the emergency room. Who said A first, Monica? I put next in between.
Shirley did. Shirley
All right,
did.
Shirley got that one. Which of the following is a correct step in administering Narcan? Turn the person on their stomach, test Narcan. Wait, I got them covered here. Sorry. Can someone else see the screen? Chris, you want to read it?
I can't see it.
Test Narcan in the screen. Tilt the person's head back. Insert the tip of the device into the nostril. Press the plunger. Tilt the person's head back. Insert the tip of the device into the mouth and press. Oops, I forgot. Who got number C first?
Michelle.
All right, just make sure she didn't win already. If you've already won, let some other people win, okay? Don't bogart my Narcan. How do you put somebody into the rescue position? You turn them on their side, top leg crosses the lower leg, top arm crosses the lower arm, and place both hands under the head. Put them in the sitting position, propped up against the wall. Turn them on their stomach, face down, put them on their back with their head to the side. Who said A first?
Dolores.
Oh, Amanda.
So I was just taught you how to do that rescue position there. Yeah, you already probably found them propped up sitting against the wall. So we want to move them from that position in order to administer the Narcan. If I feel uncomfortable giving rescue breaths, what should I do instead? Continue chest compressions until the EMS arrives or the person wakes up, lie the person on their stomach and leave, wait until somebody more qualifies arrive, or blow softly on the person's face.
A, Amanda.
A, Amanda, yay. A for Amanda. What should you do if you think somebody is overdosing and you don't have Narcan? Put them in a cold shower or bath, shake them or slap them to wake them up, try to make them vomit, or immediately call 911.
911.
Yay, who is that?
Terry.
Terry?
Yep.
Monica, get that one.
Terry and Lorraine.
I don't know, you have to get that. All right, well, that was the end of the quiz. Does anyone have any questions for us about this? I hope that was a little bit helpful about using the Narcan. And like I said, if you really want to know point by point that you feel like that it's tricky, it's really not tricky. I'd watch the video and about the chest compressions, you know, exactly where you put your, you put your hand on right at that sternum place and, practicing on the CPR doll. It's 120 a minute, right? Is that correct? I believe that that's correct. And that's a lot. So it takes a little bit of work. So it's better if you have somebody else and you can't stop once you start. So, so that's what I have about this. What do you think? Any questions, any comments? Is this helpful? Are you all willing to become?
This was really helpful, especially going over the first aid stuff again, because I haven't done it, but I'm certified in it. I mean, you gave out some really good information about if the person is overdosing and you give Narcan, you have to be careful. 5-10 minutes later, the opiate could still be in their system and the Narcan could be wearing off. That I didn't know.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially there was this story about some guy who supposedly woke up and shot the police officer. He grabbed his gun, but we think that was just a lie, that, that it wasn't really true, that that's what happened. But the person is going to be was a little bit testy when they come out of that. Oh, hey, Teresa. Anyone else have any questions or comments? See, the OD from the cocaine or a stimulant, it won't be harmful. It won't do anything. It won't do anything if there's no opioid in the system. That's what's great about the Narcan, is it goes for the opioid receptors. It doesn't. And so the thing with why you want to go for the Narcan, though, if you don't know, is because they're cutting the cocaine with the fentanyl, and it does work on fentanyl. Anyone else? So if you want or you need a certificate, please put your email address in here, and I'll send a certificate to everybody who attended today. And I will, thanks, Tony. And I will also, and if you got something that you won and we didn't reach out to, or you didn't put your name and Monica doesn't have your address, let us know too. And I would give out some Narcan to everybody, but I don't have the muscle relaxers. It all depends if there's an opioid in it, and we don't know, because what's happening, and that's an important question, Teresa. What's happening is your doctor won't give you any more, so you start buying stuff on the street, and the stuff on the street, we don't know what it's cut with. And so because we don't know what it's cut with, and fentanyl is cheap, they cut everything with a little bit of fentanyl. It goes a long way, but it's killing people. All right. Any other questions that I missed?
No, but please make sure that you give me information. Desiree, Robbie, Rory, Sasha, Molly, Melissa G, Amanda Morgan, Sherry, Shirley,
Make
Michelle,
sure, yeah, Michelle, you sent it to me privately, but could you turn around and give that to Monica so we have it on one list?
Doris, and Terry. And then we have to give away a couple
Oh, yeah.
items.
We have
And
some
so-
$50 gift certificates. Who's still here?
Okay, so the question is, and the first person in chat to get the answer correctly, who is the best Narcan trainer?
Renee Barbeau.
Yay! Yay!
In chat, who said that?
Terry.
Terry, you got it. And who said Monica? You get the next one.
It was Bobby. So Bobby
Yeah,
Joe,
Bobby Joe.
Bobby Joe gets the other one. And
Bobby,
listen,
you're tearing it up, girl.
that's great. So,
Hey, I have one question now.
okay.
I put it in chat, but it was a while ago. I understand Narcan won't affect like cocaine or stimulants. However, let's just say somebody had like asthma or they're prone to having seizures. Could it potentially have an effect on your interaction with medications or other medical conditions?
Would you email me that privately message me that? Because I'll look into that. I can't answer that and I don't want to make up an answer.
I will
Okay.
send that answer out to everyone.
Yeah, we'll send that answer out and we'll put it in. I'll do some research this afternoon and find out. The other thing is I just want to let you know that I'm available to come and do community trainings, and so is Monica up north in the Reno area. And I don't know if Christy is over in LA, but I can go to the LA. If Christy's willing to too. We're willing to come in and do trainings for people because I think it's really, really important. And how I got trained, in case you're really excited and you want to become a trainer too, is remember I said I went to the one in Skid Row and I went to have the girl come out from the harm reduction place. There's an online program too that will train you to be a train the trainer and you take the quiz and stuff. But what I did was I took several Narcan trainings because I got the bias from one and the procedures from the other. I got the CPR training from First Red Cross, and I got all of those components so that I really wanted to make sure that I was capable of giving people the best information possible, considering that I've never overdosed, I've never seen an overdose, but I just really believe that we should really be cognizant of having some Narcan in our house if anyone is on codeine and any kind of medication like that, because like I said, it's not a street problem. It's a across the country problem. Oh, Middleborough, Mass. Oh, that's where my niece and my older sister is. So thank you, Lauren, for being here. Oh, that's gonna make me cry, especially since I was talking about my nephew who they all lived over in that area. Oh, yeah, it's very sad. My nephew turned 30 about a week or so ago, and he had passed away last Christmas. And I used to reach out to him after I worked in treatment, and he didn't even know who I was. And he's like, who is that crazy lady who keeps reaching out to me? I'm there. Have you tried medically assisted treatment? What can I do to help? And he just really, oh, thanks, Stephen. He just really, he got it. He had a lawn care business going, and you know what? It was just that one fatal dose, and that's all it takes to be dead. So, all right. Well, this is really great. I really appreciate all of you coming out here to be with me on this International Overdose Awareness Day. Please share a message on your walls and let people know that overdosing isn't just junkies in the street, and it's a big problem, and we're all here to solve it. So thank you. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Christy, for being here, and I appreciate all of you who took time out of your day today.
Thank you, Renee. This was wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Renee, stay on so I can copy the chat.
Okay.